I'm George غالاوي, and I present كلمة on Al Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. كلمة means free word. That's what I speak. So كلمة is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Al Mayadeen television. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen television. Coming to you from London with an audience of distinguished experts and one or two enthusiastic amateurs like me. We're talking to you from London, but we're talking about Palestine. We're talking about the Palestinian people. And in particular, we're talking about the penchant for targeted assassination being practiced now, as it has been for decades, by the settler state of Israel. There is no place in the world that is sacrosanct. They have killed people everywhere. In Norway, they killed people in Dubai. But tonight, the proximate cause of this discussion is someone they appear to have murdered in Sofia, in Bulgaria. Not only that, they killed him in the Palestinian embassy in Sofia, in Bulgaria. And there was no sign of a break-in. We're talking about a story that is as yet unsolved. We're talking about an assassination. The exact culprits and culpability of others has not yet been ascertained. I refer to the fighter of the PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who was, they call him a fugitive because he escaped from the clutches of the Zionist state, but we call him a freedom fighter. His name was Omar Nayef, and he had been, as it were, at large, so far as the Israelis were concerned, for many years. He had a wife and 3 children in Bulgaria. He was entitled to the protection not just of the Bulgarian state, but the protection of the official Palestinian embassy, the ambassador and his staff inside the embassy. It doesn't appear that he got any of that. Now, we are hoping to speak by Skype to Ahmed Nayef, his brother. I'm not sure where he is, but if I can turn to the screen, let's try and see if we can make contact. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Brother Ahmed.
Assalamu alaikum.
Brother, we're very sorry for your loss, and I appreciate that it will be painful to go through it again for a television audience. But it's
I know, but thank you very much, Mr. Galloway.
It's a big story, and it's a very significant one, and it's significant not just for your family, but for all of us. Please tell us, first of all, how your brother Omar came to be in the Palestinian embassy in Sofia in Bulgaria.
Do you have a problem? Do you mind if I speak in Arabic?
No, it's better if you do. Go ahead.
Okay. في البداية دعني أتحدث عن عمر وقصته. عمر هو حالة فلسطينية فريدة من نوعها. بدأت قصته منذ نعومة أظفاره، حيث شارك في العمل النضالي منذ كان طفلا، ومن ثم انتقل إلى العمل العسكري، من العمل الجماهيري إلى العمل العسكري، ثم حكم عليه بالمؤبد، وهناك خاض إضراب عن الطعام مدته 40 يوما. تم نقله إلى أحد المستشفيات، ومن هناك تمكن بعملية معقدة جدا الفرار من سجانه. عاش حوالي 4 سنوات مطاردا من قبل الاحتلال لفترة طويلة. الاحتلال قلب كل حجر، حاول الوصول إليه بكل الطرق، لأنه لم يتمكن. هزمهم في تلك الأيام، ثم تمكن أيضا عمر بعد ذلك بعملية معقدة جدا بتلك الأيام من الفرار من فلسطين والذهاب إلى أحد الدول العربية، حيث تنقل هناك بين عواصم عربية عديدة، ومن هناك انتقل إلى إلى بلغاريا، حيث بدأ بالعمل هناك، وكان يشارك في النشاطات الجماهيرية للجالية الفلسطينية. كان محبوبا، كان شخصية مقبولة لدى الجميع. قامت القوات الإسرائيلية بتقديم طلب رسمي بتسليمه إلى الجهات الإسرائيلية. عمر لجأ إلى السفارة الفلسطينية بتاريخ 15/12/2015، معتقدا بأن السفارة الفلسطينية تشكل له مأوى آمن، ولكن للأسف حصل ما حصل كما سمعتم.
And who does the family hold responsible for the breach of security at the very least, which must have occurred for a fighter, a freedom fighter, from who is a fugitive from the Zionist state, being murdered in the embassy?
طبعا المسؤولية في الحقيقة تنقسم بين ثلاثة أطراف. هناك مسؤولية مباشرة مسؤولة عنها إسرائيل وجهاز الموساد بالتحديد، وهذا واضح للعيان، وطبعا لأنهم قاموا بطلب تسليمه. المسؤولية أيضا مباشرة بما يتعلق بالحكومة البلغارية وبالأمن البلغاري، لأنهم حسب اتفاقيات جنيف كان من المفترض أن يقدموا الحماية لكل الهيئات الدبلوماسية والسفارات الموجودة على أرضهم. إذا كان من المفترض منهم تقديم الحماية والرعاية لعمر بصفته موجود داخل السفارة، إلا أنهم تواطؤوا ولم يفعلوا ذلك. هنالك طرف ثالث أيضا قصر في هذا الموضوع، قصر بطريقة مدروسة في الحقيقة للأسف، وهو الجانب الفلسطيني. وهنا أنا أتحدث عن أشخاص معينين موجودين في داخل السفارة، حاولوا دائما الضغط على عمر بكل الطرق وإخراجه من السفارة. عمر لم يمتثل لهذا الموضوع، وفي حينها قامت الجبهة الشعبية بإصدار بيان تهديد ووعيد للسفارة، ودعت الخارجية الفلسطينية إلى القيام بمسؤولياتها. خرجت علينا في آنذاك الخارجية وقالت: نحن نعرف عملنا، ونحن لن نسلم عمر إلى الجهات البلغارية، ولن يتم تسليمه للجهات الإسرائيلية. ولكن للأسف رفضوا جميع طلباتنا بتركيب كاميرات للحراسة، رفضوا طلبات الجالية الفلسطينية بتأمين الحماية لعمر، كانوا يضغطون عليه، كانوا يريدون منه أن يخرج من السفارة بأي ثمن كان. رفضوا تأمين الحماية حتى يوصلوا رسالة واضحة له بأنه يجب عليك الخروج، لا يجب أن تبقى هنا. فبالتالي المسؤولية كما قلت هي تتوزع بين ثلاثة أطراف: إسرائيل، بلغاريا، وبعض الجهات الفلسطينية.
And what are the demands of the family?
مطالبنا واضحة في الحقيقة، لنا رسالة واضحة نوجهها في البداية للحكومة البلغارية، وهي أن نظامكم القضائي الآن على المحك. مطلوب منكم توفير الحقيقة، والحقيقة كاملة وغير مجتزئة. نحن كعائلة نتوقع ذلك، نتوقع أن يصدروا تقريرهم الطبي، تقرير الطب الشرعي بأسرع فرصة ممكنة، وأن يكون دقيق 100%. فريقنا الطبي جاهز. نحن قمنا بتشكيل فريق طبي مكون من 4 أطباء شرعيين من جنسيات مختلفة. نحن قمنا أيضا بتشكيل فريق قانوني سنقاضيهم، سنتوجه إلى المحكمة الأوروبية لحقوق الإنسان. نريد الحقيقة كاملة، لن نكل، لن نلين. الجالية الفلسطينية في صوفيا تقف معنا وقفة رجل واحد. رسالتنا للسلطة الفلسطينية أيضا: يجب أن تحاسبوا كل من قصر، كل من تواطأ. يجب أن تتعاملوا بالأمور في هذا الموضوع بطريقة جدية أكبر، وعدم تشكيل لجان هدفها فقط ذر الرماد في العيون. نحن نريد الحقيقة كعائلة، خلفنا كل جماهير الشعب الفلسطيني. قضية عمر قضية رأي عام، لن نسكت، لن نمل، سنواصل المطالبة بهذه الحقوق، بوضع البلغاريين دائما تحت المساءلة من أجل الوصول إلى الحقيقة. وإن لزم الأمر أيضا سنتوجه إلى البرلمان الأوروبي، سنطالب بجلسة استماع، ستذهب زوجة الشهيد هناك لقول ما يجب أن تقوله. فإذا رسالتنا واضحة جدا تحديدا للبلغار في هذه اللحظة: نحن نعول عليكم، نريد أن يقدم الفاعلون إلى المحكمة. رسالتنا أيضا واضحة للسلطة الفلسطينية: نريد محاسبة المتواطئين والمقصرين. لا، الحقائق واضحة، التقصير واضح. جميع الأطراف التي باعت عمر بالطريقة الدنيئة يجب أن يدفعوا الثمن سياسيا طبعا. هذه رسالتنا كعائلة.
Where are you now?
I'm in Ramallah.
Give my regards to the brothers and sisters in occupied Palestine, and may God have mercy on your brother's soul.
Thank you very much, غالاوي.
La shukra la wajib. Wassalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Bye.
A harrowing story of the assassination of yet another Palestinian freedom fighter, one who was entitled to the protection of the country in which he'd taken refuge and of the Palestinian Authority whose embassy in which he had taken refuge. And it would appear that he received no security from either. Omar Naif is not the only person murdered in the European Union by agents of Israel. And of course, the murder of an earlier Palestinian official in Dubai utilized the use of dozens of stolen passports from European Union countries, including from Britain. In fact, Britain expelled the Mossad chief from London in protest at the use of British passports in that particular murder. Didn't do much good because the aeroplane that delivered to Tel Aviv the extant head of the Mossad in London was promptly boarded by the new head of Mossad in London, who came back on the inward bound flight. But it did indicate that there are limits to the collaboration between European Union countries and this lawless murder gang called Mossad. But those limits appear to be elastic. Bulgaria is a European Union country. It is a country that has to be held to account, because you cannot have these kind of assassinations taking place on European Union soil without a response from the European Union. So one of the reasons for this discussion tonight is to force the European Union to take seriously this crime. But as this is a television program coming to you from London but through Beirut, there is another, and for me even more disturbing question which arises. We expect the murder gang called Mossad to murder people. That's what they do. The scorpion stings and the Mossad kills anyone who stands up against the great crime which has been committed against the Palestinian people. But what of President Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, his administration, his authority, and his embassies? There are many questions arise out of this. If this freedom fighter took refuge in the embassy in Sofia, why was he being repeatedly bullied to leave? If this freedom fighter, a Palestinian citizen, moreover, one who was fighting for the freedom which President Mahmoud Abbas's government supposedly is also fighting for, why was he not received as a welcome guest? Julian Assange has been 4 years in the government of Ecuador, even though he's Australian, from London, with no connection whatsoever to Ecuador. Whilst Omar was a Palestinian freedom fighter being forced to leave the sanctity, the security of the Palestinian embassy there. This is a big question. The European Union has to answer its questions. Bulgaria has to answer its questions. But President Abbas has to answer this question. Why did your embassy staff repeatedly try to force Omar Naif out of the building? And did you or any of your officials play any part in setting up this murder? It's a big question about which I feel very strongly. As many of you know, from when I was 21 years old, I was a close comrade of the late President Yasser Arafat. He too was murdered. And many questions still remain about his murder and who directly and indirectly was responsible for it. You'll have inferred from the remarks I've just made that I don't have all that much confidence in the Palestinian National Authority or their ambassadors around the world. If I tell you that I have been fighting the Palestinian cause for 41 years and I have never once been invited to the office of the Palestinian ambassador in London, and he's been here for well over a decade, maybe 15 years. I was beaten and hospitalized in a savage attack by a Zionist in London who expressly stated in court that he had attacked me for Israel, and I'm still waiting for the get well card from the Palestinian embassy in London. Not a phone call, not a visit, not a cheap. So if I sound upset by Ahmed's story, I'm very upset by it indeed. But of course, the main criminal is Israel. And if they can murder 14-year-old girls in the streets of Jerusalem and leave them bleeding to death, drinking coffee beside their corpses that they just killed, if they can take selfies of settlers beating Palestinians in occupied Palestine, why wouldn't they go to Bulgaria to murder somebody who had stood up against them? Question is, why does everyone else allow it? In the face of all this criminal activity, you'd think that Israel would be ostracized by the international community. You think they'd be punished, maybe a sanction here and there. But no. The terrorist state that calls itself Israel continues to receive a red carpet everywhere it goes. Its victims are called the terrorists, and they, the terrorists, are called the victims of terrorism. Just this day, Netanyahu declared, in absolute defiance of international law, that his state will never give up the illegally occupied Golan Heights, which they stole by force back in 1967. Nobody said a word against it. Not even, so far as I could see, any Arab government. No Arab leader busily killing Arabs in Yemen, busily killing Arabs in Syria, could find even a word of condemnation of Netanyahu's brazen intention to having stolen something to keep it forever. In fact, it's worse. Netanyahu is demanding that the whole world recognizes this act of theft. And he's attacking the international community for its failure so far to do. So this case is the base for this discussion. But we can build a superstructure on top of the double standard that lies and runs through this entire disaster, Nakba, catastrophe, suffered by the Palestinian people. Now let me turn to the audience. Brother.
شكرا جورج. يوسف صحفي فلسطيني مقيم في لندن. في البداية نقدم تعازينا الحارة لعائلة الشهيد المناضل عمر نايف. بالحقيقة منذ وقوع حادثة الاغتيال شكلت لنا صدمة كبيرة، حيث أنها ليست الأولى ولن تكون الأخيرة. يعني كما كان السؤال المطروح، من هو المسؤول؟ طبعا إسرائيل دولة تتصرف فوق القانون الدولي، لم تحاسب في الحروب السابقة على غزة أو في الأراضي الفلسطينية المحتلة، لم تحاسب بسبب جرائمها بحق حوادث الاغتيال الأخرى التي حدثت كما تفضلت في أوروبا وفي العالم العربي. طبعا موقف السلطة يعني هو كما نعرف موقف هزيل، هناك حالة ابتزاز من الجانب الإسرائيلي للسلطة الفلسطينية. السيادة الفلسطينية منتهكة. هناك شعور بالتقصير من هذه القيادة الفلسطينية تجاه الجاليات العربية أو الفلسطينية بالتحديد في أوروبا. لكن كما بالنسبة للإجابة على سؤالك لماذا تتصرف إسرائيل بهذه الوقاحة، طبعا بسبب الضوء الأخضر الذي تتلقاه من الإدارة الأمريكية، فهي لا تحترم الاتفاقيات، لا تحترم سيادة الدول، تعتقل، تقتل، حيث مؤخرا أيضا هددت السلطات الإسرائيلية بالقيام بحالات اغتيال ضد نشطاء المقاطعة بسبب نجاحاتها التي حدثت في مؤخرا في الساحة الدولية. نحن نطالب أيضا بكشف الحقيقة وبمحاسبة الفاعلين. هناك الكثير قيل عن هذه الحادثة، والسلطات البلغارية مطلوبة لتوضيح موقفها مما جرى. مرة أخيرة يعني إسرائيل دولة احتلال. الصهيوني المشروع الصهيوني قائم على إحداث حالات الرعب ضد كل من يتجرأ بمقاومة الاحتلال، لكن الشعب الفلسطيني مستمر في نضاله ولن يرفع الراية البيضاء.
Yusuf, thanks for that. We'll be right back after this. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you from London, but discussing events in Bulgaria and in occupied Palestine. Indeed, increasingly, we can say throughout the world, because as Yusuf explained before the break, these threats against activists, they don't even have to be Palestinian. They don't even have to be people who are taking up arms against the Zionist state. They can be anybody showing solidarity with those who are. We took the كلمة camera out into the streets of London to try and find people prepared to talk about this. Take a look.
What do you think of intelligence services carrying out assassinations outside of their country?
It's quite a tough one, really, because I feel obviously you should really try and protect your sort of home interests, so it should more be within your own country, especially for something as big as assassination, essentially. But at the same time, obviously, people would argue on the Israel side that they're under massive threat also as well. And essentially, if they don't take out, sort of the targets outside their country, then eventually that will lead to, damage being caused inside the country also as well. So maybe in that sort of situation, it may be right to do as well.
I'd like to say I condemn it and it's bad, and I think I do, but of course, you may well be in a position where that's the only way you could possibly do that if you wanted to, so it may not be that simple. But no, I mean, in general, I think that's a bad thing.
I think that is terribly wrong too. That is an invasion of other countries' national sovereignty, which it is a basic principle in international relations, should be respected.
Do you think countries who allow assassinations on their territories should be scrutinised?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the important thing is this stuff should be open. You should be able to scrutinise what's happening. I don't think you can just say that assassination per se is bad, because of course you're assassinating potentially bad people who might do something even worse, but you need to be open about why you're doing it. Otherwise,
I guess it's one of those things. Again, it's all situational. So obviously, if let's say they're about to commit some sort of terrorist offence or so as well, then you have to stop them. Like you can't let them continue and stuff as well, and that may be the quickest and most effective way, essentially.
Well, there you see how deeply the poison of the narrative of the so-called war on terror has seeped. These were intellectuals from London's Global University, and yet that was the kind of ambiguity with which they viewed these matters. Look, this is simple. A foreign country murdered a refugee who was twice a refugee, He was a refugee in Bulgaria, and he was a refugee in an embassy, recognized as an embassy by the Bulgarian state, recognized as an embassy by the European Union. And yet who's doing or saying anything at all about it? That's how far the double standard when it comes to Israel's crimes has gone. At least that's my point of view. Let's take the lady in the front row. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Fatima. I am a Palestinian as well, and a filmmaker. Regarding what you've said, actually, first about your attack, George, in London, on behalf of the Palestinians, I'm really sorry about what happened to you. Having said that, actually, we tried to call you, but we did not have any connection with you, so we're sorry about that. Regarding Omar Naif, 52 years old Palestinian who was killed inside the Palestinian embassy in Bulgaria. First, actually, I have actually here evidence that saying that he's a Bulgarian citizen as well, and he sought actually refuge in the 15th of January 2015 in the Palestinian embassy, and he was living inside the embassy since that time until he was killed. However, having said this, actually, there was a lot of issues actually inside the Palestinian embassy that did not mention. First of all, that the Palestinian embassy tried to get actually a security from the Bulgarian foreign secretary.
The security was withdrawn. They used to have it.
That's true. They said they cannot take it. They cannot take it because there was research that has been done by the foreign Bulgarian government administration saying that after 20 years, if there is no any fear or threat in any embassy, we cannot provide you any security. So the Palestinian embassy in Bulgaria was with no cameras provided for them or any security. Therefore, yes, Omar Naif has been assassinated inside the embassy. Having said this, any fail of any responsibility from the Palestinian embassy will be sacked. This is what I have heard actually recently from the Palestinian Authority and from the people who are investigating within the case of Omar Naif. The issue of this actually raising a lot of cases. You've said Yasser Arafat was assassinated inside Palestine and inside his office. In Al-Muqata'a, exactly. So how about Omar Naif or any other person, any other member? So it's not unusual
but
about
Arafat
Israel.
could only have been assassinated in the Muqata'a with the collaboration of somebody.
Well, this is not the
possible.
case.
He was poisoned.
The case is he was killed, so we have to have investigation. We know this, and we know that if any fail of responsibility, those people have to be punished. We know this actually, and everybody is agreeing with this, either from the Palestinian public or from the Palestinian Authority. This is clear for everybody, but also we have to say. This is actually raising another case. Are we going to be actually tomorrow in the same place or in the same actually shoes of Omar Naif, that if we are active inside Europe, are we going to face the same responsibility? This is the other issue actually. We have to ask the government of Bulgaria and the European countries that we are living in.
Well, I take all of those points. Let me take the very smallest, tiniest of them first. I was a member of Parliament when I was attacked. My address was the Houses of Parliament, and the Palestinian ambassador knows that address. But he never used it. This is a small point, but I just want to make it clear. So, the British Member of Parliament most associated with the Palestinian struggle was put in hospital by a pro-Israel attacker who went to prison for 16 months, and I'm still waiting for a
But
get
we
well
love
card.
you, George.
A get well card.
Anyway,
You do,
we
and I'm
love you,
grateful to
George.
I'm
And we're
grateful
proud
to
of you, don't
You
worry.
and I have been together many decades, even though you don't look it. The attribution of blame that Ahmed gave was, I think, correct, and you have echoed it. There are three parties here. The first, and I called them in my introduction, the principal criminal is Israel. It's quite clear. They killed him as they killed earlier officials, and the number one criminal in this picture is them. But the second responsibility is Bulgaria, and by extension, the European Union. Their reasons for withdrawing the police from the Bulgarian embassy, that nobody had attacked it for 20 years, is simply absurd. How many years since anybody attacked any embassy in London? Yet every embassy in London is covered by 24/7 security. This is a normal diplomatic obligation of any government, never mind a government of such an advanced union as the European Union. The Bulgarian attitude is lackadaisical, lax at the very least, and conspiratorial and collaborative at the very worst. Because how could an Israeli agent or agents get into the embassy if there had been Bulgarian police on the door? Cameras, I'm sure that Abu Mazen can provide cameras for the embassy. They don't need the Bulgarians for that. I hope there were cameras there. It would be very suspicious if there were not. And those cameras should be able to tell us who came in, because there was no sign of break-in. But the third party is the national authority. It has to be, because it was their embassy and there was no sign of a break-in. It's not like a van drew up and a lot of gunmen got out and smashed their way in and murdered Omar. There was no sign of any disturbance of any kind. So, given what happened to Abu Ammar, my friend, who could only have been murdered in the Moqata with collaboration by somebody inside the Moqata. He wasn't shot. He drank tea with the polonium in it, which poisoned him. So who made him the tea? Who served him the tea? That's what I want to know. And until my last breath, I'll go on asking this question, because this man was like my father. I demand to know. He was like your father and your father. We demand to know what happened to him. Of course Israel is the killer, but who helped them to kill Arafat? I don't want to turn this whole program into Arafat, but for me, it has real echoes of this. There was no sign of how Arafat was killed. There was no sign of how Omar was killed. They were both killed in Palestinian property, and they were entitled to the protection. Who else would like to make a contribution? Madame.
Sandra, I am a human rights activist. I work within Minds group. We hold demonstrations regularly on all sorts of issues with regard to the occupation of Palestine. We held a couple of demonstrations outside the Bulgarian embassy here in Queen's Gate, offered the ambassador here a letter demanding assurances for Omar's protection. We didn't get any answer. I personally have called the embassy in Bulgaria on 3 occasions. Twice, Dr. Madbouh wasn't available to speak to me. I spoke to him the 3rd time. He assured me that Omar was not in the embassy. That's by the by. We really do need a complete 100% transparency with regard to this case. And the last insult, the cherry on the cake, so to speak, is that Israel is now demanding to have the body of Omar to be sent back to Israel. Now, my reading of this is they want to circumnavigate an autopsy that will actually reveal the responsibility of the Mossad. As far as the PA is concerned, they also have a lot to answer for.
Now, I can understand, having said the critical things I have, why they would say to you that he was not in the embassy. I can understand that. I don't necessarily blame them for that. You could even make a security case for saying he's not in the embassy, because you know that Israel is looking for him to kill him at worst and take him back to occupied Palestine at best. But the transparency point you make is the key one. We need absolute transparency from everyone involved here, from the Bulgarian authorities, from the Palestinian embassy and the national authority, and from the European Union. We need absolute transparency on what happened. And if it is established through that transparency that he was killed by an assassination squad from the Mossad, then Israel must be punished. Otherwise, what is the European Union saying? You can come to any of our countries and kill anyone you like. That's the road to total anarchy and murder on the streets of European capitals. Now, what group did you say was demonstrating outside the Bulgarian embassy?
In Mainz. In Mainz.
It's very important that people like you were doing that. I was not myself aware of this case, and I reproach myself for that. And it's one of the reasons why I feel so bad about it now. Once upon a time, Bulgaria was a big supporter of the Palestinian people. Now, perhaps, like so many others, it has changed sides, and that's a very great pity for the people of Bulgaria as well as the people of occupied Palestine. Well, more of this after the break. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming from London, talking about Palestine and about the case in Bulgaria of the murder of the Palestinian freedom fighter there in the grounds of the Palestinian embassy. And of course, we cannot but view this in the context of other Israeli assassinations, other Mossad operations, and the double standard that is applied to them that would never be extended to others. In the case of the British, they assassinated 3 unarmed people on the rock in Gibraltar, and it became an absolutely international scandal that they had done so, even though Gibraltar was British territory and the British were involved in a war against the Irish Republican Army, and all 3 of the people assassinated were members of the IRA. And yet that became a story, a scandal so big that it almost cost ministerial careers. Israel, it would appear, as Yusuf put it, is able to act with impunity everywhere it goes. And some of the public seem to think that that's okay. Let's see if the next group of people polled by our Vox Pop camera, let's see what they think. Take a look.
What do you think countries would gain if they cooperate with other intelligence services for them to carry out assassinations inside their own country? What do you think they gain?
Well, I mean, extra information, of course. I mean, it's certainly a good thing. I don't know about assassinations. It's certainly a good thing for intelligence services to cooperate with each other. I mean, we've heard about these arrests just now, which were due to cooperation across borders.
Well, it might serve their narrow self-interest in various ways, geopolitical interests, for instance, to remain, to have certain power in a region, for instance, and we see this going on all the time in the Middle East, for instance.
I think essentially just a bit of knowledge or so as to whether it's actually an effective method of, protecting their own kind of interests and stuff.
Israel has carried out numerous assassinations of Palestinian activists outside its borders. Do you think that's justified?
No. No, obviously not. No, I don't think it is. I don't think it is justified. I would be very interested, though, in having a serious discussion with anyone that would like to say that they are, compelling valid reasons for it and what they would be, but I don't see any.
Someone's genuinely an activist? Definitely not. So it depends what you mean by activist, really. It depends if that's someone who's themselves responsible for killings or if they're simply a political activist.
Well, you see the double standard here. If that question had been, do you think it's justifiable for the PLO to kill pro-Israel activists outside their own territory, not one person would have any doubt or equivocation on that matter. And you always have to try and do that when you're dealing with the Israel-Palestine conflict. You have to say, what if the boot was on the other foot? And of course, when you ask that question, you really have no doubt about the answer. Dr. James, please.
Thank you, James Thring, Ministry of Peace, a long-time activist for the Palestinians and other Arab people, mainly because I feel that the Zionists are getting away with criminal activities, which, as you said, no other country would get away with if they tried the same sort of thing. But although I've been following the activities of Mossad for at least 30 years.
They've been following your activities. And
they've probably
too.
been following mine as well, but they haven't killed me yet. I consulted one of their whistleblowers, a book about assassinations, and there were a few dozen cases in the book by Ostrovsky, The Other Side of Deception. But then I looked at Google, where I thought, well, they're bound to have wiped out any reference to assassinations there. But there are 33 pages of Israeli assassinations in Wikipedia's list, and it amounts to 387 cases of assassination altogether. That's not including the number of people who've accidentally, as it were, been killed in the process of assassinating the person they wanted to kill, which is yet another crime that they are or should be guilty of. 64 of them were Palestinians. They're all Palestinian related. 64 of those were in other countries, i.e. not Palestine, and none of them were in Israel. So they're not entitled in the first place, according to the quotation you gave earlier, to assassinate people in other countries, if indeed they're allowed to do it in their own country. Now, the fact that they can get away with this kind of criminal activity in as many as, not as many as 64, but about 50 other countries, with nobody taking action against the Israeli state entity, that suggests that they have, well, as we already know, an insidious control over those countries' administrations, over the media, and over even academics, and now even over local authorities who want to try to support the BDS, the campaign.
That's about to become a crime.
It's bound to, exactly. Now, for a rogue state to get an honest, inverted commas, country like Britain to enact an act like that suggests that the rogues in this rogue state are of an unprecedented level of criminality, which has got to surely one day rebound on them. It can't go on. The only hope I get from amongst other things, the Community Security Trust, which is an Israeli organization bound to keeping Israelis and Jewish people safe, did a world survey about a year ago in which they found that over 50% of people expressed what they would call anti-Israel or anti-Semitic sentiments. Now that means that although we get the impression that they're winning all the time, the underlying feeling amongst the world population, and it's backed up by the non-aligned group of nations, which is around about 120 nations, including India and China, that suggests that we're not as far from winning, getting these people into a court like the European Court of Human Rights, or better still, courts in each country that they've offended against, so that Netanyahu and the High Command downwards begin to feel the effect of international justice. Do you think that's a reasonable hope?
I think you make a number of important points there. Their definition, the Community Security Trust, is that what it's called, CST? Their definition of anti-Semitism, of course, is a highly tendentious one. Anti-Semitism exists. It is a foul form of racism. But what they define as anti-Semitism is more often people, like the good people here, expressing political opposition, not to Judaism as a religion or Jews as people, but to Zionism as an ideology and Israel as a state. Someone who was anti-Soviet did not wish harm on the Russian people. On the contrary, they would say, we want communism removed because we love the Russian people. And all that people like you, people like me, all that we are arguing for is to free everyone from this Zionist ideology, which is the other side of the coin of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism says that Jews who live in Britain are not really British, and they should leave. That's what the anti-Semites say. It's also what the Zionists say, exactly the same, that they're not really British and they should leave and go and live in your house, on your land.
Also, George, Arabs are Semites. So
yes, of course. That's an even further point to make. The person who attacked me was a British Jewish convert. He had become a Jew only weeks before he attacked me. But by doing so, he automatically gained the right to go and live in your country, in your house, to which you cannot return. This is the madness of all of this. Let me move on to another. You look like an expert, sir, with that computer.
Not really, just a bad memory. Yes, Tony Greatrix, aerospace engineer, retired, now activist on the campaign for justice for Palestine. The word assassination is defined as a planned murder. The project of Western-created Zionism, both pre-Israeli state and now, has always involved planned murders of many who have impeded the Zionist project. Viewers may not be aware that Zionists attempted to kill our own British Foreign Secretary and leading members of our government in London in 1946. In fact, they went so far as recently revealed as to plot to bomb the British Parliament by aircraft in the same year. We have evidence they were behind a letter bomb assassination attempt on US President Harry Truman in 1947 after his mild criticism of their violence. In 1948, they even progressed to assassinate UN envoy Count Bernadotte. The question is this: is not the murder of its opponents, both domestically and beyond its borders, part of the DNA of Zionism, both then and now? And if so, the very existence of the Zionist state has indeed proven its worth.
Well, the point that you make is a very strong one that is too little remembered. The state of Israel and the Zionist movement's victory in the Palestinian disaster was all based on terrorism. And the British were quite often the victims of it. They tried to murder Mr. Churchill at the height of the Second World War, when we were a part of the alliance that was liberating the Jews from the concentration camps in Nazi-occupied Europe. They were planning to murder Churchill, for goodness sake. They planted a bomb in the British Foreign Office. They hanged 2 British sergeants in the orange groves with piano wire and took pictures of them hanging there and broadcast them to the world. They blew up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, killing more than 90, I think 92 British civil servants, British citizens. They were involved in a full-scale terrorist war. And the 2 terrorist organizations, the Irgun, Zvaliome, and the Stern Gang, responsible for this terrorism, both of their leaders became prime ministers of Israel. Yet both Shamir and Begin were treated as statesmen, with red carpets rolled out before them. And Netanyahu is just the political son, or grandson now, I suppose, of these kind of terrorist leaders. So I think the point that you make is absolutely correct. Not just that this state was born out of terrorist violence, but that it has continued, including in this case, to exercise the methods of international terrorism to kill and terrify its opponents. And yet, as I said earlier, they, the terrorists, are treated as the victims of terrorism, and the victims of terrorism are called the terrorists. Thus, insult is added to injury, the very considerable injury suffered by these 2 young people here, neither of whom can return to their homes in Palestine, and millions of Palestinians scattered around the world, none of whom can return to Palestine, even though they, in many cases, still have a key to a house which belongs to them, still have the title deeds to a house and land that belongs to them. And you could say they're the lucky ones living in London. The unlucky ones are in refugee camps inside Palestine and can see the very land that belonged to them and from which they were driven. More of this after the break. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, where we are discussing here in London events in Bulgaria and indeed the whole history of assassination and terrorism which gave rise to the State of Israel and its continued occupation of Palestinian land and people. And we've heard, we've gone back to the 1930s and 40s, and we are dealing in the present, in the current, with an assassination that took place in the Palestinian embassy in Sofia in Bulgaria. Let's take the gentleman at the back. Yes.
I have a question. You know, EU and Israel have a strong relationship. And do you think they really can put pressure for them or take up the case for investigation, because investigation is more important about this case?
Well, first of all, I don't think that the relationship between the European Union and Israel is all that great now, because, as Dr. James pointed out, all of these crimes must have an accumulated effect on European public opinion, which must have at least a small effect on the politicians who run European countries and the European Union. And that's why some countries have granted recognitions, not worth much, but it's worth something, to the so-called State of Palestine. Even if you were pro-Israel and you were a European statesman, Let's imagine I'm the president of the European Commission, and let's imagine even more fantastically, I am a supporter of Israel. It would still be incumbent upon me to say, you can do to the Palestinians what you like, but you can't do it here. Because by doing it here, you're making a fool out of us. You're making it seem as if we do not have any sovereignty at all. You're making it seem like we are your agents. That's what I would say, even if I loved them, instead of how I actually feel about them. That's what I would say. And any self-respecting European leader, European Union leader, Bulgarian leader would have to say, don't kill people on our land, because this is making a fool out of us, and we can't accept that. The lady here.
To go back to the original question of British victims of the Zionist movement, isn't it just very ironic? It's more of a rant that I'm having, that war criminals are wined and dined here, beginning with Tzipi Livni, Shaul Mofaz, Netanyahu, and more recently Edelstein. It is just unbelievable that this is going on, considering the history.
Well, it's even worse, because we persuaded an English judge to issue an arrest warrant for Livni and Mofaz, and they had to run to the airport to escape out of Britain before that warrant could be executed. After which the British government changed our law to make it impossible for anyone to persuade a judge to give such a warrant in the first place. Go ahead.
To add insult to injury, Cameron is willing to celebrate ethnic cleansing with the Balfour Declaration in the centenary next year. That's completely ridiculous. I've never heard such a thing.
Well, I'll see you on the demonstrations against it. Fatima.
Well, the question is, I slightly disagree with you regarding the security collaboration between Israel and the European, because it's a little bit strong. And you know, the big example is Naif Omar's case, is Omar Naif's case, sorry. He was wanted by the Israelis, and the Bulgarian actually administration wanted to arrest him, and that's the reason he went into the embassy to seek refuge. So the collaboration between Israel and European countries such as Bulgaria or another, it's still actually going on. And Omar Naif's case is not the only case actually been in Europe. We have in history, we have actually many cases been assassinated, many Palestinians been assassinated. Among them was Majid Abu Sharara. He was in Rome. He was assassinated. In his bed, they put the bomb, and they killed him. That was in 1981. Mahmoud al-Hamshari, he was also very close to the French administration. He was killed inside France, inside Paris, actually, with his daughter. And there was actually lots of collaboration. A lot of these actually Palestinian, you know, high profile, I would say, members of the PLO or whatever, they were actually assassinated, and they caused them that they were terrorists. Despite the fact, Mahmoud al-Hamshari, for example, he never known how to carry a gun. He never known how to shoot people or to carry a gun, but he was very close to the French administration, and that's why he was assassinated. But the issue is about assassination and the collaboration between Israel and Europe still going on. Furthermore, I would like actually to raise the case about the BDS and the activity of Israel around Europe, around UK particularly, and the state of USA. There is a case actually we touched last month. We have a branch of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign in Richmond, and usually they have their meeting every month. And they were actually attacked by the Jewish human rights, something they call them. We've heard from the BDS that the Israeli embassy is trying to activate any members, trying to stop any activity for the Palestinians in the US and in the UK, within sending people into this public meeting to stop them or to report it to the embassy.
Yes, that's what's happening, and its purpose is to stop the meeting, but also to stop venues from allowing such meetings.
That's true, and that's what happened in Richmond, actually.
Yes, and of course your organization had its bank account closed by the cooperative bank in Britain. Yusuf.
Yeah, just Fatima, I think you forgot also to mention the famous, renowned Palestinian artist Najil Ali, who was assassinated in London. So it seems there is no protected place. And also, let's not forget also the assassination or the slow death that Palestinian prisoners and political activists inside 25 Israeli prisons and jails across the occupied territories who are being subjected to medical negligence, deprivation of family visits, and so on. And this is also considered indirect assassination or a slow death, simply because they protest or they defy Israeli laws against the Israeli occupation. And these people, young and old, they will never, all of Israel's attempts to scare them, to intimidate them, it will not succeed, because these people, they have a just cause, and nothing will stop them from protesting or, showing their anger against Israeli practices.
Now, in London, the Israelis have sent as their new ambassador one of the most notorious of all of their mouthpieces. Mark Regev, he calls himself, is now the Israeli ambassador in London. If you watch the video of my appearance at the US Senate in 2005, you will see him sitting behind me in the front row. He had come along hoping to witness my political demise, and he witnessed something different. He is the man with the Australian accent. He's from Adelaide, living in your country, when he had a nice house in Adelaide in Australia, a free country, a beautiful country. He came to live in your country, and he became the most notorious of the mouthpieces, ready to apologize for and to lie for every crime that the Israelis committed when he was in occupied Jerusalem as a spokesman for the foreign ministry. Well, so worried are they about your activities here in London, they sent him here. The previous ambassador got into some regrettable personal difficulties. I don't want to go too deeply into that. He had to go in disgrace, and Regev has been sent to steady the ship. So we can expect more of what happened in Richmond. That's Richmond in London, not Virginia. We can expect more of that in the rest of Regev's.
But let me just finish this, actually. It's about the anti-Semitism. They are claiming that, those activities is anti-Semite and stuff like that, Having said this, actually, the Semitism, if they are using this black card, it doesn't work with the Palestinians, because the Palestinians already are Semite, and the pure Semite, particularly the Muslim community.
Yeah, I think that we have to be careful with this, because I think that they will just change the... What they are talking about is anti-Jewish racism.
That's true.
And which exists. They want to equate opposition to Israel with anti-Jewish racism. And they have many people, including the Labour leaders right now, running from this question.
But
and they hope to get a definition that opposition to the existence of the world's only Jewish state equals anti-Jewish racism. That's the game, and Regev has been sent here to try to win that argument. We have to be on
but it's a laugh, and they can't play this black card. It's a laugh for us, actually, because the Palestinians are actually Semite. The Palestinians,
but you're not
it's
Jews.
nothing to do.
That's the
It's nothing to do. But this is a big debate, actually, between the Muslim and the Jewish community, that who is the pure Semite. Semitism, actually, we know that who is the Semitism, and so who are the believer of the
people
prophet.
watching this knows, but it's a different
we
issue.
know the Jewish community, actually, they used this after the Second World War to differentiate themselves from the other community in Europe, but nothing to do with the Semitism or anti-Semitism, just to differentiate themselves. I want to go back, actually, about the assassination.
No, you've spoken long enough. I need to let other people in. Dr. James.
Actually, 75% of the people in Israel aren't Semitic at all. They're Ashkenazis, so it doesn't apply there. But I wanted to say that just being anti-Israel doesn't mean you're anti-Semitic, even if you take Semitic meaning Jewish. You know, I'm anti a lot of the things the British government does, but I'm not anti-British.
You couldn't be more British.
Thank you, George. It's kind of you to say so. And also, may I just say that this whole business of assassinating people, murdering people, without cause in a lot of cases. I mean, the reasons given here are very vaporous. The people are suspected that they might be doing something that might offend or damage something in Israel.
They murdered a waiter in Norway.
Yes.
Thinking he was a member of Black September.
Yes.
He was a Moroccan waiter.
That's right.
They murdered him in the restaurant. They have a long history of such murders.
But can I say that for a state that's got so much military power, so much control of governments all over the world, they've got security services that they own in America, running airports, running hospitals over here, G4S and so on. For that sort of state to have to resort to murdering people that they think might be a bit of a nuisance or a threat means that it's nothing to do with that at all. It's a form of terrorism. It means that they're so near to that edge that I thought I've discovered when I saw the CST survey. They realize that the end is near, and they're having to terrorize everybody by saying, we've murdered so-and-so. They don't mind now. It's all out in the public arena. So it must be a terrorist objective that they've got. It puts them in the terrorist state category firmly and squarely, in my view. Nobody else, not even ISIS, comes close to them.
Well, one of the reasons for the transfer of ISIS terrorist opportunities to Europe, to Paris and Brussels, and God knows where next, is because they are close to the edge in Iraq and Syria. Because ISIS is weak, it is attacking much softer targets in European capitals. But that doesn't make it better, it makes it worse. Because this kind of terrorism, I don't know, Omar. I know that the PFLP has a long history of resistance. And I assume that Omar was a dedicated cadre of the PFLP. But Israel is a nuclear-armed superpower, and he was in Bulgaria. What danger, existentially, was he to Israel? If he was such a danger that he needs to be murdered, then there must be a lot of people on their murder list. There must be.
He has blood on his hands.
Wow.
They claim.
They talk about blood on hands. They have enough blood to swim in on their hands. I've been George Galloway. This has been كلمة here for Al Mayadeen Television in London. It's been marvelous. Thank you.